The morning sun cast long shadows across the military academy's parade ground as 17-year-old Marcus Chin stepped off the bus. His worn sneakers hit the polished concrete, and he immediately felt the weight of dozens of stares. Other cadets watched him from the dormitory windows, whispering among themselves as they sized up the new arrival. Marcus adjusted his cheap backpack and looked around the impressive campus. Stone buildings towered above him, each one bearing the academy's proud emblem. Everything here screamed discipline, tradition, and money, three things Marcus had little experience with. He'd grown up in a small apartment above his grandmother's restaurant in Chinatown, where the smell of dumplings and the sound of sizzling woks were his daily soundtrack. The acceptance letter to Brookstone Military Academy still felt like a dream. When it arrived 3 months ago, Marcus had read it 5 times before believing it was real. A full scholarship based on his academic performance and essay about overcoming adversity. His grandmother had cried tears of joy, but Marcus felt terrified. This was a world he didn't belong to. "Fresh meat," called out a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see 3 cadets approaching, their uniforms crisp and perfectly pressed. The leader was tall with blonde hair and a smirk that suggested he owned the place. His name tag read Williams. "I'm Cadet Captain James Williams," the blonde said, circling Marcus like a predator. "And you must be our charity case." "Marcus Chan, right?" "Chen," Marcus corrected quietly, his grandmother's voice echoing in his mind about always standing proud of their family name. Williams laughed. "Chen, Chan, Chang, same difference. Tell me, scholarship boy, did you even know what a military academy was before you got lucky?" The other 2 cadets snickered. Marcus recognized the type immediately. Rich kids who'd been handed everything, who saw someone like him as entertainment. He'd dealt with bullies before, but never in a place where he couldn't just walk away. "I know enough," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Oh, he's got attitude," said the second cadet, a stocky redhead named Patterson according to his badge. "That won't last long here, will it, Williams?" Williams stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell his expensive cologne. "Listen carefully, Chen. This place has traditions. Standards. You might have fooled the admissions committee with your sob story, but you don't fool us. We know exactly what you are." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks but said nothing. His grandmother had taught him that sometimes silence was the strongest response. "Cat got your tongue?" Patterson taunted. "Or maybe you don't speak English so good?" The third cadet, a thin boy named Hoffman, pulled out his phone. "This is perfect. The look on his face is priceless. Wait until everyone sees this." Marcus watched as Hoffman started recording. He thought about his grandmother, probably at the restaurant right now, telling customers about her grandson who'd made it to the prestigious military academy. She'd sacrificed so much for this opportunity, working 16-hour days to support them both after his parents died in a car accident when he was 8. "Nothing to say?" Williams pressed. "Maybe you should consider transferring somewhere more suitable. I hear the community college has an opening." A small crowd of cadets had gathered to watch the show. Marcus could hear their whispered comments and muffled laughter. His hands clenched into fists, but he forced them to relax. Violence wouldn't solve anything here, it would just give them exactly what they wanted. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus said finally, his voice quiet but firm. Williams raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. I earned my place here just like everyone else." The blonde cadet's smirk widened. "Earned it? By being poor and writing a tear-jerker essay? That's not earning anything, scholarship boy. That's just charity." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not anger, something colder and more focused. He looked directly into William's eyes and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You're right about one thing. I am different from most people here. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment where the heat didn't always work. I've been working part-time jobs since I was 14. I've never owned anything that wasn't secondhand or on sale." The crowd grew quiet, sensing something unexpected happening. Marcus continued, his confidence growing with each word. But, here's what you don't understand. Every day of my life has been a test. Every meal was planned, every dollar stretched, every opportunity fought for. While you were probably having tutors help with your homework, I was studying by streetlight when our power got cut off. William's smirk began to fade. So when you talk about traditions and standards, Marcus said, stepping forward, remember that I didn't get here because someone made a phone call or wrote a check. I got here because I outworked, outscored, and outperformed thousands of other candidates, including some just like you. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. That doesn't change anything. You still don't belong here. Marcus turned to face the growing crowd of onlookers. Maybe not. Maybe I'll wash out in a week. But, I'll tell you what won't happen, I won't quit because someone thinks I'm not good enough. He shouldered his backpack and looked back at Williams. Thanks for the welcome committee. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to find my dormitory and start proving you wrong. As Marcus walked away, the crowd parted silently. He could feel their eyes on his back, some curious, others dismissive. Williams called after him, but Marcus didn't turn around. He had more important things to focus on than playground bullies in fancy uniforms. What none of them knew, what Marcus himself was still discovering, was that this moment would be remembered long after graduation. Not because of Williams' cruel words or the crowd's laughter, but because of what would happen next when they all learned exactly who Marcus Chen really was beneath the scholarship label they'd pinned on him. The first test at Brookstone Military Academy wasn't going to be academic or physical. It was going to be something much more fundamental, and Marcus was about to surprise everyone, including himself. The next morning arrived with the sharp blast of a bugle at 0530 hours. Marcus rolled out of his narrow bed, already dressed in the physical training uniform he'd laid out the night before. His roommate, a quiet kid named David from Oklahoma, was still fumbling with his bootlaces. 5 minutes to formation, Marcus said, helping David with his gear. He'd learned military time and basic protocols during his summer job at a veteran's home, but he didn't mention this to anyone. Outside, Cadet Captain Williams stood at the front of the formation, clipboard in hand and his usual smirk firmly in place. When his eyes found Marcus, the smirk widened. Today we begin physical assessments, Williams announced to the group of 30 new cadets. This will separate the real soldiers from the pretenders. Some of you might want to call your parents now and save yourselves the embarrassment. His gaze lingered on Marcus, making sure everyone understood the intended target. The first test was a 5-mile run through the hills surrounding the academy. Marcus took his position in the back of the formation, ignoring the whispers and sideways glances. Williams positioned himself near the front with Patterson and Hoffman flanking him like bodyguards. Begin, shouted the drill instructor, and the group took off. Immediately, Marcus noticed something interesting. While Williams and his crew sprinted to the front to show off, their breathing was already labored after the first quarter mile. These were kids who'd grown up with personal trainers and expensive gym memberships, but they'd never run because they had to. Marcus had been running since he was 12, not for exercise, but because it was the fastest way to get between his 3 part-time jobs. Delivering groceries, helping at construction sites, and cleaning office buildings had given him a different kind of strength than any gym could provide. He maintained a steady pace, breathing controlled and even. By the second mile, he'd passed half the group without seeming to try. By the third mile, only Williams and a few others remained ahead of him. The hills grew steeper, and Marcus could see some cadets already falling behind, walking more than running. Williams kept looking back, clearly frustrated that the charity case was keeping up. Getting tired, scholarship boy? Williams called out during a particularly steep climb. Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned in the restaurant kitchen that talking wasted energy better used for working. Instead, he shifted into a higher gear, his legs finding the rhythm they developed during years of necessity. The 4th mile separated the serious runners from everyone else. Marcus moved steadily through the pack, his breathing still controlled while others gasped and stumbled. Williams noticed and tried to increase his pace, but his form was falling apart. Rich kid training could only take someone so far. As they approached the final mile, Marcus found himself in second place, right behind Williams. The blonde cadet was clearly struggling now, his expensive running shoes slipping on loose gravel as he tried to maintain his lead. "This isn't over," Williams panted, sweat pouring down his face. Marcus pulled alongside him. "No, it's not," he agreed quietly, then shifted into the final gear he'd been saving. For the last mile, Marcus ran like he was chasing the bus on a rainy morning, knowing that missing it meant being late for work and losing money his family needed. He ran like he was carrying groceries up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. He ran like everything depended on it, because for most of his life, everything had. He crossed the finish line a full 30 seconds ahead of Williams, barely breathing hard. The drill instructor, Sergeant Rodriguez, looked at his stopwatch twice before marking down the time. "Outstanding, Chen. That's the third best time I've seen from a first-year cadet." Williams stumbled across the finish line, his face red and his legs shaking. He looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and rage, clearly not expecting to be beaten by someone he'd already dismissed. The rest of the day continued with similar results. Obstacle courses that reminded Marcus of navigating construction sites. Rope climbing that was easier than the fire escape he'd used countless times when their building stairs were blocked. Push-ups and sit-ups that were nothing compared to loading 50-pound bags of rice at the restaurant. With each event, Marcus quietly excelled while Williams and his crew grew more frustrated and vocal. "Lucky run," Patterson muttered after Marcus posted the highest score on the obstacle course. "Beginner's luck," Hoffman added when Marcus completed the rope climb faster than anyone expected. But, by evening, their excuses were wearing thin, and other cadets were starting to take notice. Marcus wasn't just keeping up, he was setting the pace. That night in the cafeteria, Marcus sat with David and a few other quiet cadets who'd been overlooked by the more popular groups. Williams' table was notably louder than usual, their conversation punctuated by occasional glances in Marcus' direction. "You're making enemies," David warned quietly. Marcus shrugged, spooning cafeteria rice that reminded him of home. "They made me an enemy before they even knew my name." "William's father is some big military contractor," another cadet whispered. "His family has serious connections here. You should be careful." Marcus considered this while chewing his dinner. He'd always known that places like this operated on different rules than the world he came from. Connections mattered more than merit, money talked louder than effort, and outsiders were barely tolerated. But he'd also learned something important today. Whatever advantages Williams and his friends had in terms of money and connections, they couldn't buy the kind of strength that came from real struggle. They couldn't purchase the discipline that came from having no choice but to succeed. As if summoned by his thoughts, Williams appeared at their table with his usual entourage. "Nice job today, Chen," he said with false friendliness. "Really impressive for someone who probably never exercised before getting here." Marcus looked up calmly. "Thank you." "Of course, physical fitness is just one part of being a cadet," Williams continued. "There's also leadership, strategy, and understanding how things really work around here. Things they don't teach in whatever school you came from." The cafeteria grew quieter as nearby tables tuned into the conversation. "I'm sure you're right," Marcus replied evenly. Williams smiled, sensing an opening. "I'm glad you understand. See, some people think that just because they can run fast or climb a rope, they belong here. But this academy is about breeding the next generation of military leaders. People who understand tradition, honor, and proper conduct." Marcus set down his spoon and looked directly at Williams. "What exactly are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that there's a difference between being able to do push-ups and actually belonging at Brookstone. Some people need to learn their place." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, conversations stopped entirely. David shifted nervously in his seat, sensing trouble brewing. Marcus stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. At his full height, he was actually slightly taller than Williams, something that seemed to surprise the blonde cadet. "Let me ask you something," Marcus said quietly. "What makes you think you belong here more than I do?" Williams sputtered. my family has a history with this academy. My grandfather graduated from here. My father, your grandfather. Your father. What about you? The question cut through William's bluster like a knife. For the first time since Marcus had met him, the cadet captain seemed genuinely unsure of himself. Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. See, I think I'm starting to understand how things really work around here. Some people get handed their spot because of what their family did. Other people earn it because of what they can do. He picked up his tray and stepped closer to Williams. Tomorrow we start academic classes and leadership exercises. Why don't we see which one of us actually belongs here? The academic building buzzed with nervous energy as first-year cadets filed into their initial classes. Marcus walked through the hallways lined with portraits of distinguished alumni, many bearing names that matched those of his classmates. This was legacy territory, and he was an outsider looking in. His first class was military history with Colonel Harrison, a decorated veteran whose reputation for being demanding preceded him. Marcus took a seat in the middle of the room, notebook ready and pen in hand. Williams and his crew claimed the front row, clearly trying to make an impression. Today we begin with strategic analysis, Colonel Harrison announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen real combat. I want someone to explain the significance of the Battle of Gettysburg in terms of resource allocation and terrain advantage. Williams' hand shot up immediately. Sir, the Union forces held the high ground, which provided tactical superiority and textbook answer, Cadet Williams, the colonel interrupted. Anyone can memorize basic facts. I want strategic thinking. The room fell silent. Marcus raised his hand slowly. Yes, Cadet Chin? Sir, the battle wasn't won because of high ground. It was won because Lee made an emotional decision instead of a strategic one. He'd won so many battles through aggressive tactics that he forgot the most important rule of strategy, knowing when you're at a disadvantage. Colonel Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Continue. Marcus stood, feeling every eye in the room on him. Lee's army was operating in enemy territory with limited supplies. Every day they stayed meant getting weaker. But, instead of using hit-and-run tactics or withdrawing to better ground, Lee chose a direct assault because that's what had worked before. He let pride overrule strategy. And, what's the lesson for modern military leaders? The colonel pressed. That winning previous battles doesn't guarantee future success. That adapting to circumstances is more important than sticking to what worked in the past. And, that sometimes the best strategy is knowing when not to fight. The colonel nodded approvingly. Excellent analysis, Cadet Chun. That's the kind of thinking that separates good officers from great ones. Williams turned in his seat, his face reddening. Behind him, Patterson and Hoffman looked equally frustrated. The pattern continued throughout the week. In leadership principles, Marcus was chosen to lead a team exercise while Williams' group struggled with basic coordination. In strategic planning, Marcus presented solutions that impressed the instructors while his tormentors fell back on memorized responses that lacked real understanding. But, it was during the survival training exercise that everything changed. The entire first-year class was taken to a remote section of the academy grounds for a 3-day field exercise. They were divided into squads of 6 and given minimal supplies, a map, compass, basic rations, and emergency communication device. The goal was to navigate to specific checkpoints while completing various challenges. Marcus found himself assigned to Squad Charlie, along with David, 2 other quiet cadets named Rodriguez and Kim, a nervous kid called Thompson, and, unfortunately, Williams. Clearly, someone in the administration thought it would be character building to force them to work together. Williams immediately declared himself squad leader, despite the exercise instructions stating that leadership should rotate. I have the most experience with this kind of thing, he announced. What experience? Marcus asked. Summer camps, outdoor adventures with my family. You wouldn't understand. Marcus said nothing, but David shot him a knowing look. Summer camps with professional guides were hardly survival training. The first day went poorly under Williams' leadership. He insisted on taking shortcuts that led them through swampy terrain, soaking everyone's boots and slowing their progress. When Rodriguez suggested following the marked trail, Williams dismissed it as taking the easy way. They missed 2 checkpoints and arrived at their overnight position exhausted and behind schedule. Williams blamed everyone except himself. If people had just followed orders instead of questioning every decision, he grumbled while setting up his expensive camping gear. That night, it began to rain. Hard. Marcus watched as Williams struggled with his high-tech tent, the kind bought from outdoor specialty stores by people who'd never actually needed to stay dry in a real storm. The waterproof fabric was top quality, but Williams had no idea how to set it up properly. Around them, other squad members huddled under inadequate shelter, getting progressively wetter and more miserable. Thompson was already shivering, his lips turning blue. Marcus made a decision. Working quietly, he used skills learned during childhood camping trips with his grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who'd taught him that survival wasn't about having the best gear, it was about making do with what you had. Using fallen branches, his poncho, and some rope from his pack, Marcus constructed a simple but effective lean-to that actually shed water. He positioned it to take advantage of natural windbreaks and drainage patterns his grandfather had taught him to recognize. "Hey," he called softly to the other squad members. "There's room over here." David came first, followed by Rodriguez and Kim. Thompson hesitated, clearly torn between staying loyal to Williams and getting warm. Williams looked up from his still collapsing tent. "Where are you going?" "I'm your squad leader." "You're welcome to join us," Marcus offered, holding open the improvised shelter. "I don't need help from," Williams started, then stopped as a particularly strong gust of wind and rain soaked him completely. Pride warred with practicality on his face. Practicality won. Soon all 6 squad members were huddled together in Marcus' shelter, actually warm and dry for the first time since the rain started. Williams sat in sullen silence while the others quietly thanked Marcus. "How did you know how to do this?" Thompson asked, his shivering finally stopping. "My grandfather taught me," Marcus replied. "He said the most important survival skill was keeping your team alive." Williams looked up sharply at the emphasis on team. The second day brought new challenges, and Williams' leadership continued to falter. When they reached a river crossing that looked dangerous, Williams ordered them to ford it at the widest point because it looked easier. Marcus studied the water for a moment, then pointed upstream. "The current's slower up there, and there are more rocks for footing." "I didn't ask for your opinion," Williams snapped. "People's safety isn't an opinion," Marcus replied calmly. This time, the other squad members didn't wait for Williams' permission. They followed Marcus upstream to the safer crossing point. Williams had no choice but to follow. At the halfway point of the exercise, squads were given a complex navigation challenge with multiple possible routes to their objective. Williams spread out the map and announced his chosen path, a direct route that looked shortest on paper. Marcus studied the terrain features and elevation lines. "That route goes through a steep valley with no bailout options if weather turns bad. This path is longer but safer, and actually faster given the terrain." "I'm the squad leader," Williams insisted. "Then, lead," Marcus said quietly. "But a real leader listens to his people and makes decisions based on what's best for the mission, not what makes him look good." The words hit Williams like a physical blow. Around them, the other squad members waited, clearly torn between following rank and following common sense. Williams stared at the map, then at Marcus, then back at the map. For the first time since Marcus had met him, the cadet captain looked genuinely uncertain. "What do you recommend?" Williams asked finally, his voice barely audible. It was the first time he'd asked anyone for advice, and everyone knew it. Marcus pointed to his suggested route and began explaining the tactical advantages, speaking to Williams with the same respect he'd show any leader asking for input. As they set off on the safer path, something fundamental shifted in the squad's dynamic. Williams was still technically in charge, but now he was actually listening. And Marcus, without ever claiming authority, had become the person everyone naturally looked to for guidance. By the third day, they were functioning as a real team, with Williams deferring to Marcus on technical decisions while maintaining his official leadership role. They completed all their objectives and arrived at the final checkpoint ahead of schedule. But the real test was still coming. The emergency alarm shattered the peaceful afternoon at Brookstone Military Academy. All cadets were immediately called to assembly, where Colonel Harrison stood at the podium with an expression more serious than anyone had ever seen. "We have a situation," he announced, his voice cutting through the nervous murmur of assembled students. "A civilian hiking group is missing in the mountain wilderness area adjacent to our training grounds. Local search and rescue is overwhelmed due to multiple other emergencies, and the weather window is closing fast." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He'd spent enough time in the mountains to know what a closing weather window meant: people could die. "Due to the nature of this emergency," the colonel continued, "we're implementing a real-world training exercise. Senior cadets will coordinate with emergency services while first-year squads will provide ground search support. This is not a drill." The assembly hall erupted in whispers. Real search and rescue was far beyond what first-year cadets normally attempted. "Squad leaders will receive detailed assignments momentarily," Colonel Harrison announced. "Remember, this is about saving lives, not personal glory. Think before you act, follow protocols, and bring everyone home safely." Williams stepped forward to receive Squad Charlie's assignment, his face pale but determined. When he returned, he spread the map on a nearby table where his squad could gather around. "We're assigned grid sections 7 through 12, he announced. "It's rough terrain, but the missing group's last known position was somewhere in this area." Marcus studied the map intently. The assigned search area covered several steep ravines, dense forest, and rocky outcroppings. If someone was injured and couldn't signal for help, they could be invisible even from just a few feet away. "What's our approach?" David asked, echoing what everyone was thinking. Williams looked at the map, then at his squad members, then at Marcus. The past week had changed something fundamental in their dynamic, and everyone could feel it. "Marcus," Williams said quietly, "you know this kind of terrain better than I do. What do you think?" It was a moment that marked everything. The cadet captain who'd spent days asserting his superiority was now publicly asking for guidance from the scholarship student he'd tried to humiliate. Marcus pointed to specific features on the map. If they were hiking and got into trouble, they'd likely seek shelter in one of these natural formations. But if someone's injured, they might be anywhere. "We need to split up to cover more ground, but stay in communication range." "Split up?" Thompson asked nervously. "Is that safe?" Marcus looked around at his squad mates, David with his quiet reliability, Rodriguez and Kim who'd proven capable during field exercises, Thompson who was scared but determined, and Williams who was learning to put mission before ego. "We pair up," Marcus explained. "Two-person teams can move faster and cover more ground than 6 people moving together. But we maintain radio contact and have predetermined rally points in case weather or other problems develop." Williams nodded slowly. "What about team assignments?" Marcus considered carefully. This wasn't about friendships or comfort zones, this was about putting together the most effective search teams possible. "You and Thompson take the eastern ridge," Marcus suggested. "It's challenging terrain, but Thompson's smaller frame will be an advantage if we need to search tight spaces, and your leadership experience will help if you encounter other search teams." Thompson straightened up, clearly pleased to be seen as an asset rather than a liability. "Rodriguez and Kim, you take the Central Valley floor. Your tracking skills from Boy Scouts could be crucial if we need to follow partial trails." Both cadets nodded, already studying their assigned area. "David and I will take the western ravines. They're the most technically challenging, but also the most likely place for injured hikers to seek shelter." Williams studied the assignments and realized something important: Marcus had given everyone responsibilities that played to their strengths while taking the most dangerous area for himself and David. "What if we find them?" Williams asked. "First priority is immediate medical assessment," Marcus replied. "If anyone's seriously injured, we call for medical evacuation immediately and provide what first aid we can. If they're mobile, we escort them to the nearest extraction point. And if weather turns bad? Marcus looked up at the darkening sky. We follow emergency protocols. Human life comes first, ours and theirs. Nobody takes unnecessary risks trying to be a hero. As they prepared to deploy, Williams pulled Marcus aside. I need to say something, Williams began awkwardly. This past week. I was wrong about you. About a lot of things. Marcus waited, giving him space to finish. I thought this place was about family names and connections, and that people like you didn't belong here. But, watching you during field exercises, in classes, even now, you understand what this academy is actually supposed to teach better than I do. We all bring different things to the table, Marcus replied diplomatically. No, it's more than that. Williams looked directly at him. You understand service. Real service. I've been playing at being a soldier while you've been living like one your whole life. Before Marcus could respond, the deployment order came through their radios. It was time to move. The search began methodically, with each team checking in every 15 minutes via radio. Marcus and David worked their way through the treacherous western ravines, using rope techniques Marcus had learned during summer jobs to safely navigate steep drops and loose rock. 2 hours in, they heard it, a faint whistle, barely audible over the wind. Did you hear that? David whispered. Marcus held up his hand for silence, straining to listen. There it was again, 3 short blasts, the universal distress signal. Following the sound led them to a narrow ledge about 40 feet down a steep ravine. 2 figures were visible, one sitting upright waving weakly, the other lying motionless. Marcus keyed his radio. Squad Charlie leader, this is Team 3. We have visual contact with 2 civilians, coordinates. He rattled off their GPS position. One appears mobile, one appears injured. Requesting medical evacuation support. Williams' voice crackled back immediately. Roger, Team 3. Medical evac is inbound, ETA 20 minutes. Can you reach them safely? Marcus assessed the situation. The ledge was accessible, but barely. Getting down wouldn't be the problem, getting injured people back up would be the challenge. Affirmative, we're going down. But we'll need additional rope and possibly more personnel for extraction. Already coordinating, Williams replied. Rodriguez and Kim are en route to your position with extra gear. Thompson and I are establishing a secure staging area at the top. As Marcus and David carefully rappelled down to the stranded hikers, Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what he'd been preparing for his entire life without realizing it, not the specific technical skills, but the fundamental mission of serving others when it mattered most. The injured hiker had a suspected broken leg and was going into shock from exposure. His companion, an elderly man, was exhausted but alert. Both were hypothermic and needed immediate warming. Working with supplies from their emergency packs, Marcus and David began treating the injured man while keeping both victims warm and stable. Above them, they could hear the rest of their squad coordinating the rescue effort. When the medical helicopter arrived, Marcus looked up to see Williams expertly directing the landing while Thompson coordinated with the rescue crew. Rodriguez and Kim had already rigged additional safety lines for the extraction. As the rescued hikers were loaded into the helicopter, the medical technician pulled Marcus aside. Outstanding work down there, the technician said. Your field treatment probably saved that man's leg, maybe his life. You planning on military service? Marcus looked around at his squad, Williams organizing the gear cleanup with military precision, Thompson helping David coil rescue ropes, Rodriguez and Kim already preparing their incident report. I think I already am, Marcus replied. Later that evening, the entire squad sat in the academy mess hall, exhausted but quietly proud. Word of their successful rescue had spread throughout the academy, and other cadets kept stopping by their table to congratulate them. Colonel Harrison appeared with their official commendation forms. Exceptional performance today, he announced loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Squad Charlie demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership, teamwork, and tactical excellence this academy aims to develop. He paused, looking directly at Williams. Cadet Captain Williams, your coordination of the rescue effort showed real leadership growth. Then, he turned to Marcus. And, Cadet Chen, your technical expertise and medical intervention exemplified the kind of service-first thinking that makes great officers. As the colonel walked away, Williams extended his hand across the table to Marcus. Partners? Williams asked simply. Marcus shook his hand firmly. Partners. Around them, the mess hall had grown quiet, everyone understanding that they'd witnessed something significant. The scholarship kid who'd been dismissed as a charity case had not only proven he belonged at Brookstone Military Academy, he'd shown everyone else what belonging really meant. Later that night, alone in his dormitory room, Marcus wrote a letter to his grandmother. He told her about the rescue, about his squad, about finally finding his place at the academy. But, mostly, he thanked her for teaching him that true strength came not from what you had, but from what you were willing to give. Outside his window, the academy grounds were quiet under starlight, but something fundamental had changed. Marcus Chen was no longer the newcomer trying to prove himself. He was exactly where he belonged, ready to serve, ready to lead, and ready to show others what real leadership looked like. The cadets had indeed picked the wrong newcomer to mess with. But, in the end, everyone won.